The year is 2033, and really, the human race and technology haven't advanced much in the last 10 years. In many respects, the human race seems to be de-evolving as a species. But there is one exception. In 2030, the world was shocked when Elon Musk announced that he built a functioning time portal at a secret facility north of Las Vegas, Nevada. I'll never forget when he brought a living Smilodon back from the past as proof and let it loose on a TV set. But soon after, the United States government took over the time portal and threw Elon Musk in jail for failing to turn the technology over to them. To this day, scientists cannot recreate what Musk built. He destroyed his plans, and Elon isn't talking. The time portal does have limitations. Musk locked out the time portal so it will only travel back 100,000 years. He did this so it can't be used to influence modern human history. The time portal has a self-destruct function if somebody attempts to reverse engineer or reprogram it. Denied. Today, the portal is used strictly for scientific research only. When you travel back in time, you end up in the same place where the portal is located just 100,000 years earlier. The world through the time portal is called Sangamon, named for the Sangamon interglacial period that was occurring in North America approximately 100,000 years ago. The portal is strictly regulated to avoid disease and parasite cross-contamination. Also, no permanent structures, live animals, military weapons, or aircraft are allowed in Sangamon. The National Science Foundation was given control of Sangamon, and they set up 4 research bases. They set up 2 to the north and 2 directly to the south. In addition to this, several temporary expedition camps have also been set up. Only approved research is allowed in Sangamon. Rudimentary routes have been set up between the bases, which require capable off-road vehicles in order to deliver supplies. The routes between the bases are extremely dangerous. My company, Desert Dog Expeditions, has the government contract to make deliveries to the Sangamon bases. We are also licensed by the National Science Foundation to collect samples of flora and fauna for scientific study and educational purposes. We have professional botanists and hunters on our staff to accomplish these tasks. We just got orders to deliver supplies to 2 northern bases and to collect samples from various forms of megafauna should we encounter them. We're licensed to take 3 bolt-action or breech-loading rifles with us through the portal, and 3 cartridges of our choosing. Since the Columbian mammoth is on the list, I need to choose wisely. Desert Dog Expeditions uses Jeep Apocalypse 6x6 vehicles, pulling expedition trailers to run the routes between the portal and the bases. There are no roads in Sangamon, and it's illegal to make them, so we need to take a rough, unmarked overland route that is full of hazardous conditions and deadly wildlife. So I load up, do a final inspection in our shop, grab 3 guns, and head to the portal. Before going into the portal, everything goes through decontamination first. Now, I do one last systems check and drive into the portal. It always freaks me out. It's a little bit of a mind warp for a few seconds as you travel through the portal, then the haze fades and you're 100,000 years in the past. There is a small checkpoint and guard station set up on the Sangamon side of the portal, and once I sign my paperwork, I immediately hammer down the throttle and begin my long journey north. I plan to drive for 12 straight hours to Miller Camp. The drive to Miller Camp is very muddy and riddled with mosquitoes. Trust me, the mosquitoes 100,000 years ago were vicious. About 7 hours into the drive, I saw a group of trees rattle in the distance. I quickly pointed my binoculars in the direction of the commotion and saw a megalonyx. This giant ground sloth is very docile, but when provoked, it swings its 9-inch claws with more power than a grizzly bear. This guy wasn't on my list of specimens to collect, but he was amazing to watch. After a quick snack, I continued my drive through the wetlands to Miller Camp. Miller Camp was named after Colonel James Sweetbottom Miller, who commanded the 1st Sangamon Brigade and founded the first base inside Sangamon. The site was chosen because it lies in an area of strategic importance. Unfortunately, the site also sat right in a mammoth migration route. In 2031, Colonel Miller was killed with 6 other soldiers and 3 scientists when a herd of mammoth ran through their tents after nightfall. The location also suffered frequent direwolf attacks. In October of 2031, a wall of timber was erected around the camp. Building walls is no longer legal, so Miller Camp is the only walled settlement in Sangamon. After I drop off supplies and mail for camp inhabitants, I'm fed a hot meal and provided with a tent to sleep in for the night. At sunrise, the camp security officer, Christopher Clinton, wakes me up to tell me they spotted several big mammoths from their observation tower. He suggested that I leave my vehicle in camp and set on foot if I want to hunt one of the old bulls. I quickly put on my hunting gear, grab my 500 Nitro Express, and sneak out of camp on foot. The Columbian mammoth is bigger than a modern African elephant and is even bigger than a woolly mammoth. You need to bring one of these down with a carefully placed brain shot at close distance. The mammoths in Sangamon do not have a natural fear of humans and can get extremely aggressive when provoked. This will be a dangerous hunt, especially now that I know the group is comprised of 3 old bulls. I chose the 500 Nitro Express because it's a good balance between killing power for the largest Pleistocene beasts and tolerable recoil so I could shoot accurately. I had several employees that brought 600 Nitro Express rifles to Sangamon and decided the recoil was too much. Another bonus is that the 500 Nitro Express rifles and ammunition are readily available. When I get to the 100-yard mark, the bulls lift their head and look in my direction. Although I have the wind in my face, mammoths have incredible hearing and they sense my presence. I drop my pack, hunch down, and slowly creep closer, making every step a silent one. At about 30 yards, I slowly stand erect in front of the lead bull and bring the rifle to my shoulder in slow motion. I line up the top of the boar with the head and see his massive eyes bearing down on me. The other 2 bulls walk away, but the lead bull stands his ground. After what seemed like an eternity, the bull lets out a loud trumpet. I slow down time, carefully aim for the brain cavity, and break the trigger. As the bull hits the ground, I pull the second shot and put it right in his head. I quickly reload, then frantically try to account for the other 2 bulls, but luckily they fled into the distance. Now the real dangerous part happens. Recovering a trophy or specimen from a hunt in the Pleistocene is not easy. Dire wolves, American lions, and various other predators are on a kill very quickly. I need to sneak back to camp, grab my Jeep and some people, and recover this animal quickly. I was able to get back to camp before a small group of American lions found my kill. Myself, along with the camp security officer, 3 of his men, and 2 of the camp chefs drove to the kill site. As we approached the mammoth, the lions backed off to about 100 yards and watched us. As 4 men stood guard around the perimeter, I collected samples while the chefs butchered some of the meat off the animal to retain as camp food. As we retreated from the kill site when we were done, the lions slowly advanced to devour what was left. The American lion is much bigger than a modern-day African lion and has little respect for humans. After a long day, I took a much-needed shower, ate a delicious mammoth steak, and stayed at Camp Miller for a second night. The next day, I woke up early, hopped in the Jeep, and headed north to Ely Base Camp. It's called Ely because, you guessed it, it's near the site of the present-day city of Ely, Nevada. Ely is the northernmost base in Sangamon. It's about as far north as a permanent settlement can be because the winters are severe. Also, most of northern and western Nevada was covered by lakes 100,000 years ago. So Ely is about as far north as you can go without having to use a boat or cross a high mountain range on foot. As the route gradually changes from grassland to forest, soon the route is no longer recognizable, and I have to rely on experience and navigation skills to stay on route. During the Sangamon interglacial interval, the Earth's magnetic field was weaker and in a slightly different location than in the 21st century. There are no satellites orbiting the Earth 100,000 years ago, and geologic features are much different. So we have to navigate the land like Lewis and Clark did. This often takes frequent stops and course corrections. It's getting late and the forest is getting thicker, so I need to find a campsite for the night and settle down. I finally found a clearing in the forest and quickly set up camp for the night. You don't want to be forced to drive at night in Sangamon. Luckily, I was given a few of those mammoth steaks for the road, and I like mine rare. In the morning, I start to break down camp to continue my drive to Ely Base Camp, when I notice a set of fresh tracks crossing the road behind my trailer. These were undoubtedly fresh tracks of a huge deer. A scientist at Ely Camp has been trying to get an American mountain deer for over a year to study, but so far hasn't been able to acquire one. This deer is very close. I have permission to take one American mountain deer, and I'm excited about it. American mountain deer are much bigger than mule deer, and we now know that they're extremely wary and reclusive. Few have ever been seen in Sangamon, so getting a mountain deer to study could give us important insights into deer evolution. So I decided it's time to hunt. For this deer hunt, I'm going to be using my MMBG chambered in .30-06. When every country in the world, except the United States, Norway, and Switzerland, banned semi-automatic firearms in the Paris Firearm Agreement of 2029, bolt-action rifles filled all tactical and hunting roles for most countries. In 2029, Ruger released the Multi-Mission Bolt Gun, or MMBG, and it became a worldwide favorite after exceeding every other rifle in reliability. Ruger's patented captured controlled round feed system turned out to be the most durable and reliable action ever produced. The MMBG soon dominated the hunting and home defense markets, and aftermarket accessories quickly flooded the market. When the Army was pulled out of Sangamon and the National Science Foundation took over, they tested every rifle available, and the MMBG was the only rifle that passed their trials. Soon after, the NSF commissioned Ruger to build MMBG to their personal specifications. The MMBG Explorer package was then offered, and it became the official firearm of Sangamon. All the MMBGs in Sangamon are chambered in .30-06. They shoot 150, 180, and 220 grain loads depending on the particular mission. I hastily grab my Explorer, slap in a magazine full of 180 grainers, and begin following the deer tracks into the forest. The tracks are very fresh, so he's close. The animal is heavy and the ground is damp, so tracking is relatively easy. Luckily, the wind is also in my face. Through the thick timber, I get a glimpse of movement. I slowly deploy my binoculars and see a clearing about 100 yards away with a deer standing right in the middle of it. He is a huge buck, the biggest I've ever seen. He's physically larger than any record book buck from our time period. This is definitely an American mountain deer, and I'm going to be the first hunter to ever harvest one. I stalk to the edge of the small clearing and slowly put my scope on the deer while positioning myself against a tree for stability and cover. I'm so mesmerized by his enormous size and beauty that I almost forget that I'm hunting. I finally collect myself, line up the reticle, exhale, then slowly break the trigger. Without much fanfare, the 180 grain bullet puts the deer down after it takes 4 or 5 steps. I can't believe I was lucky enough to hunt this animal. Now, I do have to remember this is the Pleistocene, so I better get this deer in the Jeep before unwelcome guests arrive. Luckily, I find a path into the clearing so I can drive my Jeep there and use my winches to load the deer. Having lost 3 hours in the morning on my deer hunt, I need to pick up the pace driving to Ely Base Camp. There are numerous water crossings on this leg of the route, so hopefully the water isn't too high. Just before dark, I finally roll into Ely Base Camp, which is the northmost base in Sangamon and was founded by the NSF 1 year ago. Ely is definitely the cleanest and most well-organized camp in Sangamon, and it tends to have the friendliest people. I drop off what I believe is an American mountain deer to Dr. Kendall Scoville, and she is overjoyed and confirms that it is indeed an American mountain deer. Dr. Scoville specializes in cervids, and the American mountain deer has been her unicorn for the last year. This deer just might be the missing link in American deer history. After I drop off supplies and mail, I'm approached by the camp manager, Rebecca Babita, who notifies me of a bad situation, and she asks for my help. I've had a good relationship with Rebecca for many years, and I've never seen her this worried before. She told me that they have 2 researchers in a remote site that they lost communication with. The Ely camp vehicle is currently broken down, and they've been waiting on me to deliver parts to fix it. They lost communication with the remote camp 6 days ago. She asked if I could escort Ely camp's professional hunter, Josh Little, to check on the researchers and render help if needed. I agreed to help Josh and decided that we'd leave early in the morning. The next morning, I left my trailer in Ely camp, met Josh Little, and headed through the dark forest to the remote research site. When we finally arrive at the researchers' camp, it's in complete disarray. We grab our guns, exit the Jeep, and begin to investigate. The entire site is covered in tracks, claw marks, and blood. Josh immediately identifies this as a giant short-faced bear attack. Behind the sleeping quarter, we find the dismembered remains of one of the researchers. We identify her as Dr. Cassandra Dunn. We search the rest of the camp and can't locate the other researcher, Corey Delfino. Josh notices bear tracks with what looks like something being dragged. We grab more gear out of the Jeep and enter the thick forest in pursuit. Josh begins tracking, and I cover him while he concentrates on finding spoor. I grab my Model 70 Safari Express, chambered in .416 Remington Magnum, when I left the truck. This is my most trusted rifle when I don't know what to expect. The forest gets thick and dark, so I turn on my illuminated reticle and stay alert. After about a half hour of tracking, Josh finds a piece of cloth. A few minutes later, we find blood. We are definitely on the right track. As we push through, we spot a cave ahead of us, and it appears this is where the tracks lead. This must be the bear's lair. As we are trying to make a plan, we hear some snorts and grunts coming from the trees to the side of the cave entrance. Josh tells me to hold my position and be ready while he maneuvers closer to the noise to verify what it is. Josh creeps slow with the wind in his face and tries to get a view of what's making the commotion. All of a sudden, a short-faced bear appears out of the bushes and lets out a blood-curdling roar. At the same time, the wind changes direction, and we now lost the element of surprise. Josh quickly stands and raises his rifle. Josh takes aim and lets a shot go from his trusty .338 Win Mag. The bear is noticeably pissed off and looking for a fight. The bear runs away from Josh after a shot and starts coming toward me. The bear comes fast while showing teeth and claw, obviously intent on making me its next victim. The .416 fills the forest with a thundering crack that sends shockwaves through the leaves. As I run the bolt for a second shot, the bear falls dead on its stomach in a clearing 30 feet in front of me. Josh and I quickly regroup and make sure the bear is dead. This giant short-faced bear weighs at least 2,000 pounds. Now, it's time for the really dangerous work. It's the law that all human remains must be recovered in Sangamon, no exceptions. This means that we have to go into the cave and look for the missing researcher. The thought of another bear, or even multiple bears inhabiting that cave, is nerve-wracking. So we put on our headlamps, drop our packs, and reload. Now we must enter the cave. Once inside the cave, we systematically clear each corner, and thankfully, we don't see any other bears. We do notice a huge pile of animal bones in the center of the cave, and beside that lay the body of the missing researcher. After we bag up the remains and recover our bullets from the bear, we both begin the arduous journey back to the Jeep. As I drive through the dark forest back to Ely Camp with 2 bodies in the bed of my Jeep, the mood is somber and not a word is spoken. Sangamon is nature in its rawest form, a place where humans are but a snack for the countless beasts that roam this land. I'm reminded every time I exit my vehicle in this place, it could be my last. Back at Ely Camp, everyone instantly goes into mourning and a ceremony of life is held for the 2 dead researchers. As sad as the moment was, it was easy to imagine our Paleolithic ancestors performing similar ceremonies for their dead tribal members. The next morning, I hook up my trailer. Then the remains of the 2 researchers are prepared and loaded into my truck to be returned to their families. Sadly, this isn't the first time I've had to take human remains back through the portal with me. I put in 12 hours of driving today. Luckily, the rains have held off, so the path was less muddy and easier to navigate. I found a nice spot to camp for the night on the banks of an ancient lake. I set up camp, ate dinner, and enjoyed a drink. Stargazing in Sangamon is something I'll never forget. I awake early in the morning and see ripples on the surface of the lake. Then, a huge fish jumps clear of the water and lands with a thunderous splash. It's time to put together my 8-weight fly rod and get to work. I noticed that many of the lakes in Sangamon are full of leeches, so I tie on my favorite leech imitation and hope for the best. I put on my waders and walk the shoreline in front of my truck and cast for about 10 minutes. Then, as I'm stripping in my line, it suddenly stops, and the fly line is ripped from my grasp. I have a huge fish on. As I'm pulled up and down the shore, the fish takes me into my backing twice. Finally, I get close enough to identify it. This is a long extinct trout species that was previously unidentified. We call it the Sangamon cutthroat. The fish finally starts to tire, and I get the upper hand. It gives me one last jump before submitting to defeat. This is the biggest Sangamon cutthroat I've ever caught. After that great moment, I release it and prepare to leave. I needed that fish to take my mind off the tragedy that occurred 2 days ago. Now, it's time to complete the next leg of the trip, the long, rough drive back to Miller Camp. Once Miller Camp came into view, with its high timber wall, a sick feeling came over me. I knew the staff at Miller Camp were very close to the 2 dead researchers riding in the back of my Jeep. They used to work at Miller Camp. That night, Miller Camp held a ceremony for their 2 fallen friends. There wasn't a dry eye in Miller Camp that night, and that includes mine. Dinner that night was mammoth stew, made from the beast I shot earlier in the week. Miller Camp does have the best cooks in Sangamon. The next morning, I bid farewell to the people of Miller Camp and collected letters from them to deliver to their loved ones on the other side of the portal. It was time to go home. Thanks to the lack of rain, the journey through the muddy forest was easier than usual. As I got closer to the portal, the forest transitions to immense grasslands that allow a traveler to hasten their pace. But on this day, I'm taking it slow and enjoying a bounty of wildlife only a few modern humans get to witness. I roll down my windows and enjoy my final breaths of fresh air and a view unimpeded by glass windows. After driving all day, I finally reach the portal and the guard leaves the safety of his shack and approaches my vehicle. We exchange small talk about my trip as I wait for official clearance so I can enter the portal. I finally enter the time portal once again, and that sick, nauseating feeling emerges that always accompanies time travel. It only takes 20 seconds to go through the portal, but it seems like an eternity. On the other side of the portal, back in the year 2033, I immediately enter a decontamination chamber where I'm forced to sit for an hour. After that, I drive into a processing warehouse. Once there, I'm detained and searched while the vehicle and trailer are unloaded and searched. It's highly illegal to bring back unauthorized souvenirs from Sangamon. The bodies of the dead researchers are unloaded and prepared for return to their families. The samples I collected are whisked away to a giant NSF warehouse where they'll probably be forgotten for many years to come. I'm finally released from custody, and I take the 20-minute drive back to Desert Dog Expeditions headquarters. As much as I love Sangamon, it's good to be back home with my wife. But I only have a couple of days off before I'm back at my desk, planning the next trip to 100,000 years ago.